Okay, so I'm just gonna walk you through this in a video because it's a lot easier than seeing it in a photo. So first, I gotta figure out what type of curve this is. So this is the second x-ray we did. I know that this is the left side of the patient over here. This is the right side. So I know that this is a right thoracic, left lumbar curve. So I identify that up here. Next step is I'm going to draw my mid-sagittal line. So I marked the borders of S1 and bisected it with that little point there. I measured it. It measured 4 centimeters. So I made a mark about 2 centimeters, which was in the dead center, and then drew a parallel line all the way up. Okay. Step 2 is I bisect C7, which you can just draw a line through the spinous process if that's what you like to do, and then draw a perpendicular line all the way down. And I use the bottom of the x-ray as reference for these lines. And then when I measure the space between them, it's about one millimeter decompensated to the right, okay? Because my cervical plumb bob is to the right of my sacral. So I write that decompensated to the right by 1 millimeter. So then I have my thoracic curve and my lumbar curve, and I got to identify the apices, the end vertebrae, and the magnitudes for each. So we'll start with the thoracic. My apex is the most lateral, which is C7 here. So I write that over there. And then my end vertebrae is the vertebrae in which it kind of starts to move in the other direction. So in this case, I'm looking, I took my individual vertebral tilts. So it's 111, 120, 101. So my angle is decreasing superior and decreasing inferior. And this is my maximum angle here. So T11 is going to be my inferior termination for my thoracic curve. And then up here, I measured T5 and T4 were the same at 100 degrees. So I'm going to use the most superior vertebra for that. And I mark the superior end plate of T4 and the inferior end plate of T11. And I draw the lines that you see here. And then I have to make lines perpendicular to each of those and measure the bisection of the two. So this angle here is the magnitude. It is 30 degrees. I have my end vertebra. Now I'm going to do the same thing for the lumbar curve. So in the lumbar curve, again, I'm going to use T11 because this is the one where it switches basically from thoracic to lumbar curves. And my magnitudes decrease above and below. So 120 here. And then I make this end vertebra as my superior end vertebra. So I need to use the superior vertebral end plate and make that line all the way out here. And then my other end vertebra, I look down here. So I measured 78, 83, 90, 97. So it keeps my angle keeps going down. So I'm going to use L4 is my most tilted because L5 is pretty vertical. And I'm going to use the inferior end plate of that end vertebra and make my line out here. Now these two lines, they would cross way out here on my counter. So I'm going to do perpendicular lines from here and this line up here and measure the angle there, and I got 32 degrees. So this is probably the most important part, is trying to make these lines great. So how do I make it perpendicular? I use these lines on the goni as reference. Same thing over there. And then I need to line it up. Jesus. So you see how that's about 33 degrees? I got 32 earlier. So, ooh, that's off a little bit, that's why. There we go. So yeah, I'm about 32 degrees. And you can see where my movement arm is lined up on this line, and my stationary line is on the other one. It takes a long time when you're only using one hand. Okay, so there you go. That's how you would measure this angle here. And then when I'm doing the intervertebral tilts, or the individual tilts, I'm gonna use I'll do L2. I'm gonna use my stationary arm is gonna be on the mid-sagittal line, and my movement arm is gonna be, there's a couple, I'll do L1. Boom. So that's measured, that's about 98, 97 is what I marked on here. So 97, 98, somewhere in there. So you do that for literally each of these angles, all the way up and down. All right, so I've identified all the information that I need. So when we do the cobbing practice, you'll have to do the same type of stuff. So the next thing I need to do is I've done the horizontal pelvic line, so I need to do my waist rolls. So you can see I have this L2, between the L2, L3 disc space is my height. And then I'm gonna draw little half moons kind of coming in on the tissue just slightly, and it's in between the ribs and the pelvis, the iliac crests on both sides. Then I'm gonna do my thoracic pad. So you can see it's on the convex side of the thoracic curve, and I have to get it below the rib corresponding to the apical vertebra. So I look at this one as my T5, T6 rib is right here, so my T7 rib, and this is where my pad ends, below that T6 rib, and it goes all the way down to the iliac crest roll. So you can kind of see it looks shiny because I did it in permanent marker. That is my thoracic pad, and it stays on the lateral side. We don't want to, when we're drawing this, the further we draw it in this direction is the more posterior it's going to be. So we want it to stay lateral and push in kind of the direction of these arrows up, and to correct the curvature, that's fine. So then I'm going to do my lumbar pad. The lumbar pad does go posterior, so it's going to come all the way to the posterior opening, and it's going to go across from the apical vertebrae of the lumbar curve and contact all vertebrae in the same direction of tilt. So in this case, all L2, 3, 4, and 5 are all tilted to the left because that's the left side of the patient. So it's going to make contact with each of these vertebrae, and then it's kind of just shaped sort of like a wedge, and you just take it all the way over to the lateral side. And I go from the posterior opening to the lateral trim line. So then we can do the axillary extension is opposite the troch pad. And you can see the glenohumeral, that's the coracoid or coronoid. This is the head of the humerus, the scapula. You can kind of see the borders of the scapula. So we're gonna bring it up to about the T4 level, and it's gonna be about a half of a finger width. I mean, this is a drawing, so it's not to scale, obviously. And it's gonna come up and just cup underneath the armpit, and then I have it kind of flowing along the sides of the ribs on this side and connecting to the iliac crest rolls. So that is my axillary extension. The trochanteric extension is on the same side as the axillary extension and on the same side towards which L5 tilts. So L5 is tilted to my right, the patient's left. So that means that the troch extension is going to be on the left side. And I kind of estimated that the trochanter was right about here somewhere. So I just brought it down beyond that arbitrary mark. And it's about the same width as the axillary extension, as you can see. And then lastly, I would need to draw my, I need to draw a thoracic window. So the thoracic window provides a relief space for the thoracic pad for those vertebrae to be pushed on this side, basically. So my T7 vertebra or rib is right about here. So I'm gonna make a window over there. So then these ribs have a place to go in that little window once the forces have been applied. So my trim lines, I join my trochanteric extension. I don't have a inferior landmark to reference, so I'm just kind of gonna do a scoop over the pelvis here. The top of my sacrum is right here, so I'm kind of bisecting the sacrum, coming up and terminating before the trochanter. That's important. On the side without the trochanteric extension needs to come up above the trochanter. And these little scoops are for the rectus femoris muscles. So they need relief. That way we can flex our hips nicely. And then, so this joins with the iliac crest rolls, the thoracic pad here. This cuts across superior anterior at T7, which is where the xiphoid is. And then that joins with the axillary extension. So this is what the Boston blueprint will look like. Anterior trim lines. If I were to draw the posterior trim lines, it's gonna come up to about T4. So it's gonna kind of look like that. And then it's gonna come down a little bit further. So we have the trochanteric extension kind of extends to the posterior, and it's a little bit longer than the anterior trim line, and then it's going to meet above the trochanter still on the opposite side. Okay. So that is what it looks like for this one. And then I'm just going to give you a picture of the other one because it's a lot busier and there's a lot more colors going on. So enjoy.